Cristina Moretti walked the company corridors with firm steps, but the invisible weight of a lifetime rested on her shoulders. Since childhood, she had heard the same mantra: one day, all this will be yours. Her father, Alberto, repeated the words with an almost cruel pride, as if fate were a sentence. Beside her, Laura, her younger sister, always smiled silently, watching. Her gaze held something Cristina could never decipher, a mixture of admiration and something deeper, almost dark. In the Moretti household, affection was synonymous with conquest. Every gesture, every word seemed measured and compared. Cristina was the exemplary daughter, studious, obedient, ready to carry the family name like a shield. Laura, on the other hand, was the opposite, spontaneous, light-hearted, surrounded by laughter and easy affection. But beneath the glow of her joy, there was a discomfort no one noticed, not even Cristina, who believed she knew her sister better than she knew herself. The mornings were always the same. Coffee served promptly at 7, the father reading the newspaper in silence, the mother watching her daughters with distant eyes. Helena Moretti seemed like an elegant ghost, present in body, absent in soul. Cristina never understood the reason for her mother's silence. She simply accepted it as part of the routine, as if it were another family tradition. But sometimes, when she met her mother's eyes, she saw something that disturbed her: guilt. That Monday morning, Cristina received an email from her father titled "Succession Planning." Her heart raced. It was the moment she'd waited years for. The promotion meant more than power. It was the validation of a lifetime of effort. She imagined her sister's reaction, perhaps a hint of jealousy, perhaps pride. After all, Laura had always said, "You were born for this, Chris. I never wanted this responsibility." But something in that sentence, spoken months ago, began to resonate differently. I never wanted this responsibility. Did she really not want it? Or was she just waiting for the right moment to take it? Cristina pushed the thought away, ashamed of her own suspicion. Laura was her best friend, her confidant. To think otherwise was almost a sin. Still, a premonition grew inside her, like a silent shadow. At the end of the day, the two women left the office together as usual. Laura talked excitedly about a dinner with her father, to which Cristina hadn't been invited. "It's just a quick thing, Chris. He just wants to talk about the foundation, nothing major." The older woman smiled, trying to believe it. But deep down, something stirred inside her, an uncomfortable spark, a hunch that the dinner wouldn't just be about philanthropy. At home, the atmosphere was too calm. Her father seemed distant, her mother tense. Laura, however, was radiant, as if carrying a sweet secret on her lips. Cristina pretended not to understand and went upstairs to her room. From there, she heard muffled laughter coming from the study. "Nothing much," she repeated to herself, as the sound of voices echoed through the hallways. But her father's tone, grave and restrained, said otherwise. Hours later, when Cristina opened the window, she saw her sister leaving the office with a black folder in her hands. Laura glanced to the side, and for a second their eyes met. There was something different in that look, a mixture of defiance and fear. Cristina didn't know it, but this would be the first of many signs that something was being plotted in the shadows of her own house. As she lay in bed, the sound of the wall clock ticked away like a countdown. The future, the one she believed was in her hands, began silently to slip away. And for the first time, Cristina dreamed of Laura, not as a sister, but as a threat. Have you ever trusted someone to the point of handing over your future and then discovered that this person destroyed you out of envy? So subscribe to the channel now, because this story will shake up everything you believe about love, loyalty, and family. Sunday dawned with the smell of freshly baked bread and tension in the air. At the living room table,
Helena arranged the china plates, her face pale and her hands trembling. "Today will be an important day," she said, without looking at her daughters. Cristina felt her heart sink. Since dinner, she hadn't been invited. She'd noticed looks and silences she didn't understand. Laura, on the other hand, seemed ecstatic, her smile too wide to be sincere. During lunch, Alberto announced, with the pomp of someone conducting a ceremony, that he was finalizing the company's succession documents. Cristina smiled, controlling her enthusiasm, until she heard what came next. Laura will be the new CEO starting next quarter. For a moment, the world stopped. The sound of the cutlery, the rustle of the tablecloth, everything vanished. Cristina just stared at her father, searching for an explanation. He looked away. Laura feigned surprise, but the expression on her face betrayed something rehearsed. "Chris, I didn't know he was going to do that, I swear." But there was a glint in her eyes that contradicted every word. Cristina simply nodded, not responding. The silence between them was crueler than any argument. It was the beginning of a distance that would grow with each passing day.
That night, while reviewing old papers in the office, Cristina noticed that some folders were missing. Among them, the one containing the company's transfer contracts. Her blood ran cold. She remembered the black folder she'd seen in her sister's hands. The puzzle was beginning to come together, and the perfect portrait of the Moretti family was beginning to crack. The days following lunch were shrouded in silence and discomfort. Cristina tried to act as if nothing had happened, but inside her, her wounded pride throbbed like an open wound. Each morning, when she passed Laura in the company corridors, she felt the weight of a new reality. She was no longer the heir, but the shadow of the one who now occupied her place. Laura, for her part, seemed increasingly confident, as if power made her more beautiful, more alive. One night, fate revealed itself in an almost banal way. Cristina was searching for an old document in her mother's office when something fell out of a half-open drawer. A yellowed envelope bearing the family lawyer's seal. Her heart raced. Upon opening it, she found a letter exchanged between Laura and Dr. Salas, discussing the new terms of a will and the need to maintain absolute secrecy. Her hands trembled. The words were too clear to be misinterpreted. Cristina read the letter countless times, her stomach churning. Her sister, her best friend, had plotted everything behind her back. Every laugh, every recent hug now seemed like a cruel act. A mixture of anger and disbelief washed over her, not just at the betrayal, but at having blindly believed someone who, deep down, had always wanted what was hers. "Why, Laura?" she murmured, clutching the paper to her chest. Determined to find answers, Cristina went downstairs with the envelope in hand. She found Laura in the living room, surrounded by glasses of wine and a serene smile. "What's this?" she asked, holding out the letter. Her sister looked at the paper, then at her face, and let out a soft laugh. "Are you really reading old correspondence now, Chris? That's obsessive." Her calm was worse than a scream. Cristina was speechless. Laura stood, approaching with a cold, calculating gaze. "Do you really think you can control everything in this family? That Dad will always choose you? You never realized he only sees you as a version of himself, not as his daughter." The words hit Cristina like invisible blows. For the first time, she saw her sister not as a rival, but as an enemy. And worse, an enemy who knew her completely. When her father entered the room, Laura had already collected the letter. "She's accusing me, Dad," she said, pretending to cry. Alberto frowned impatiently. "Cristina, I already warned you about meddling where you don't belong." It was enough to unravel her. The public humiliation, the discredit, the feeling of helplessness, it all coalesced into a knot of despair. That night, locked in her room, Cristina tore at the pillow with her nails, trying to hold back her tears. The sound of the wind hitting the windows seemed to mock her pain. She remembered her childhood, the promises exchanged, the laughter shared, the vow that they would be sisters forever. Everything had turned to ash, and now the ashes burned.
At dawn, Cristina looked in the mirror and barely recognized herself. Her tired face, red eyes, and hardened expression. There, standing before herself, she vowed she wouldn't let Laura win. But what she didn't know was that in the game she'd entered, the rules were already written, and not in her favor. The clock struck 7 when he decided to go to work, taking the torn letter with him. The first movement of the counterattack was about to begin. The company, once a refuge for Cristina, now felt like a minefield. Every glance from the employees carried curiosity and judgment. Conversation ceased when she entered the room, and fake smiles multiplied in the hallways. Laura, with her usual charm, seemed to reign supreme, praised and admired, the daughter who had inherited not only the position, but also the respect that had previously belonged to her sister. That morning, Cristina went to her father's office. The dark wood, the smell of cigars, and the distant ticking of the clock created a stifling atmosphere. "Father, we need to talk," she began firmly. Alberto didn't look up from his papers. "About what?" he asked impatiently. "About the will. About Laura." The word hung in the air like an insult. He put down his pen, finally looking at her. "Are you still with this?" she said, her tones somewhere between weariness and contempt. "Cristina, I know what I'm doing. Laura has charisma, empathy, things you still need to learn." With each word, something inside her broke. "But I did everything you wanted," she replied, almost pleading. "I studied, I worked, I sacrificed everything for this family." Her father observed her silently, then replied coldly, "Exactly. You did what I wanted, and maybe that's the problem." Cristina staggered out of the office, feeling smaller than ever. The hallway seemed endless, the walls closing in around her. Outside, Laura was talking to the lawyer, laughing at something he'd said. It was a banal scene, but for Cristina, it symbolized the complete reversal of everything she believed. She no longer knew whether to hate her sister or herself for having believed so much. When she arrived home, she found her mother sitting on the porch, sewing in silence. "Mom, why did he do this to me?" Helena looked up hesitantly. "Because you've always been his mirror, Cristina, and he sees too much of himself in you. It scares him." The words were gentle, but they left a bitter taste. Cristina realized that love in that house was a bargaining chip, and she was broke. In the days that followed, she tried to keep up appearances, but the weight of rejection crushed her. Family dinner was now a ritual of cold stares and empty conversation. Laura insisted on taking the seat next to her father, while Cristina watched from afar, like a visitor. Helena avoided their gaze, as if carrying their burdens was slowly killing her.
One night, as she passed her father's office, Cristina heard voices. She stopped in front of the half-open door and heard Laura saying, "She's breaking down, Dad. Maybe it would be best to keep her away for a while." The silence that followed was more terrifying than any answer. Cristina leaned against the wall, trying to hold back her tears. The blow was no longer just symbolic. It was real, and it came from within. When she finally managed to sleep, she dreamed of the past, of the two girls running in the garden, laughing, promising never to be apart. When she woke, the memory seemed cruel. Laura had broken her vow, and her father had sealed it. Cristina understood in that moment that the only way out was to discover the truth and use it
against everyone. The love was over. Now, all that remained was the game. Time passed slowly, but the feeling of falling was constant. Cristina noticed something had changed in the looks around her. Employees who had previously greeted her now looked away. Old allies at the company treated her with indifference. Laura, on the other hand, seemed to shine brighter with each passing day. Meetings, once led by the eldest, were now dominated by her sister, who spoke with confidence and a practiced smile. Everything about her exuded control. Cristina tried to convince herself it was just a phase, that her father would regret it. But she only had to look around the company's corridors to understand power had already changed hands, and Laura knew it. She made a point of reminding her sister with subtle gestures, a comment about how much easier things are now, a joke about who really understands the business. The venom was disguised as sweetness. One afternoon, Cristina walked into a board meeting uninvited. The room fell silent. Laura looked up, surprised, or pretending to be. "Oh, Chris, I thought you were off today." The tone was polite, but the humiliation was public. Everyone laughed nervously. Cristina sat down anyway, trying to maintain her dignity. When she tried to offer her opinion, Laura interrupted with venomous politeness. "Let me handle this, sister. You deserve to rest." From that day on, Cristina's name began to disappear from reports, emails, and decision-making circles. It was as if she were being slowly erased from her own history. The blow wasn't sudden. It was meticulous, calculated, and Laura executed it with the precision of someone who had waited her entire life for this moment. Her father watched silently, complicit. The punishment was clear. Cristina was being exiled without leaving her place. At home, things were no better. Helena tried to mask her discomfort with affectionate gestures. "Be patient, daughter. Things will work out." But Cristina could see the fear in her mother's eyes, fear of Laura, or perhaps of what her father would do to maintain control. The house, once filled with dinners and laughter, now felt like a mausoleum where everyone whispered to avoid waking the ghosts. One night, Cristina found an old family album. The photos showed her and Laura as children, holding hands, inseparable. Turning the last page, she found a photo cut in half, the two sisters, but only Laura's face intact. Hers had been torn. For a moment, she thought it was a coincidence until she realized it was the same photo that had been kept in her father's office. The symbol was clear. She had been removed from there, too.
Determined not to let herself be erased, Cristina began writing down everything: dates, meetings, conversations. She compiled a meticulous record of her sister's manipulations and her father's complicit silences. It was her way of staying alive amidst the emotional devastation. She knew no one would believe her word, but the evidence wouldn't lie. The notebook became her new confidant, the voice no one wanted to hear. Meanwhile, Laura immersed herself ever deeper into her role as exemplary daughter. She organized charity events, posed for photos, and gave interviews discussing the responsibility of the new generation. The Moretti's names were in the headlines, and Cristina's nowhere. The irony was cruel. Laura now represented everything Cristina had ever dreamed of being. However, Laura's eyes began to change. The glow of victory was overshadowed by something darker: fear. She knew Cristina wouldn't give up, that behind the silence there was a gaze watching her every step. The war between them was no longer cold. It was silent, tense, and about to reach its first fuse. Deep down, they both knew, the next time they looked at each other, there would be no more sisterhood, only survival. Helena Moretti spent her days sewing on the porch, as if each stitch were an attempt to mend what was left of their family.
but behind her serene expression was a woman torn apart by guilt. She watched her daughters drift apart each day, and her husband, blinded by pride, widened the gap between them. "You're destroying yourselves," she tried to say once, but Alberto simply replied, "They're learning to be strong." One night, Cristina sat beside her mother, saying nothing. The silence between them was almost a character. Helena put down the needle and in a low voice said, "Laura was always more fragile. I just wanted to protect her." Cristina turned her head, hurt. "And to do that, I had to sacrifice myself?" Her mother lowered her eyes. "Sometimes one's protection is the price of another's suffering." The words echoed bitterly amid the sound of crickets and the rustling of leaves. That morning, Cristina heard footsteps in the hallway and got up. From the top of the stairs, she saw Laura and Helena talking in secret. Her mother was crying, and Laura held her hands, comforting her. The scene, at first glance, seemed tender, but Laura's tone was cold, almost threatening. "You promised, Mom. Don't forget what you told me." Helena replied inaudibly, and Cristina recoiled, her heart racing. Back in his room, he tried to make sense of what he'd heard. What did she promise? He murmured to himself. For the first time, Cristina began to doubt not only her sister, but her mother as well. Was there something deeper behind that silent preference? A secret that could explain why Laura had always felt so secure, so confident of her victory.
In the following days, Helena began to avoid her. Conversations were short, glances fleeting. Cristina tried not to harbor resentment, but the feeling of being surrounded grew. Even the gardener, a gentleman who had worked at the house for years, looked at her with pity. It seemed everyone knew something except her. The Moretti family was a castle of secrets, and the walls were beginning to crack. One Saturday, while rummaging through her mother's studio, Cristina found an old wooden box locked with a red ribbon. Inside, letters, hundreds of them, all addressed to her father, but written by Helena. The oldest read, "If he ever finds out, it will all be over." Cristina's heart froze. As she continued reading, she understood. There was a history between Helena and another man, one that predated their marriage, a secret that, if revealed, would change the meaning of everything. With the discovery, a dark hypothesis emerged. What if Laura wasn't Alberto's daughter? This would explain her mother's protectiveness, her father's coldness, her sister's resentment. The idea was absurd, and yet it made too much sense. Cristina closed the box, trembling. For the first time, the truth seemed within reach, but also too dangerous to speak. That night, Helena entered her room without knocking. "You're poking your nose in where you shouldn't, sister." Her voice was calm, but her eyes betrayed anger. "What do you know?" Cristina asked. Laura smiled, a sad, wicked smile. "Knowledge is power, Chris, and that's why you've never had any." Then she left, leaving the door ajar, like a warning or a threat. Cristina stood there, staring into space. Now she understood what was at stake. It wasn't just money, power, or inheritance. It was identity, blood, the secret that sustained the entire Moretti facade. And she knew, if she continued, no one would emerge unscathed. The news of Cristina's emotional breakdown spread through the company like wildfire. It all started with a casual comment at a lunch among directors, then became a rumor, and finally an undeniable truth. Laura just smiled, denying it without denying it. "My sister is just tired, that's all." Her words seemed careful, but they hid a precise cruelty. Cristina, without realizing it, had become the target of a subtle and devastating campaign. Employees began to treat her with pity. Friends avoided calling, and even the company doorman, once helpful, now averted his gaze. The isolation was complete.
At home, her mother tried to hide her discomfort, but the silences grew thicker. Her father, impatient, said, "Be careful what you do, Cristina. The family's image comes first." It was confirmation that for him, the truth mattered less than appearances. Cristina tried to hold her ground. She spent hours in the empty office, reviewing contracts and paperwork, looking for flaws, inconsistencies, anything that would help her prove what she knew. But Laura was always one step ahead. Every important document mysteriously disappeared. Every potential witness went silent. The playing field was uneven, and the feeling of helplessness began to transform her.
The first breakdown came on a Friday afternoon. During a meeting, one of the directors laughingly suggested that maybe she should take some time off to get her head together. Her colleagues' laughter echoed, and Cristina, unable to contain her anger, threw her folder on the table and left. In the hallway, she heard Laura apologize in her place, in the sweet voice of someone who had just been betrayed. The farce was perfect, the humiliation complete. In the next days, Cristina was removed from some duties. The internal memo read, "Medical leave due to stress." She hadn't even been consulted. Reading the email, she felt the ground disappear. Everything she had built, her reputation, credibility, and place in the family, was being erased with a click. It was like watching her own life being dismantled piece by piece. At home, the atmosphere was tense. Helena barely ate, and Laura avoided sleeping there. "She's been staying late at work," she'd say. Cristina no longer believed in anything. One night, she heard her father talking on the phone. "Yes, Laura is ready to take on everything." The words pierced the wall like blades. Cristina pressed the pillow against her face to keep from screaming. She felt like a stranger in her own home. One afternoon, while walking through the garden, she saw the gardener whispering to the cook. When she approached, they both fell silent. "What's wrong?" she asked. The woman simply said, "Nothing, Mrs. Cristina. You better rest." His compassionate tone shattered her. She finally understood that the rumors had spread beyond the company. Now the whole town was talking about the unbalanced Moretti daughter. The pain turned to anger, and anger, strength. Cristina began to plan silently. She knew the only way to win would be to become the opposite of what Lara expected, patient, calculated, and cold. She held back her tears, began to smile in public and pretend nothing had happened. It was time to observe and wait for the right moment. Meanwhile, Laura was celebrating quietly. At a dinner with family friends, she toasted the new phase of the company and her sister's recovery. Her father smiled with satisfaction, and Helena remained motionless. But in her mother's eyes there was something new, fear. Perhaps deep down, she knew that Cristina's calm was not surrender. It was the prelude to the storm. The Moretti Foundation's annual ball had always been a symbol of prestige, the night the family displayed its influence and donated small sums to great applause. Cristina hesitated to go, but Lara insisted, "People need to see that we're okay." The invitation sounded like a gesture of reconciliation, but her sister's look said something else, a silent challenge. Helena pleaded, "Come on, daughter, show some dignity." And Cristina went, dressed in red, as if going to war. The room was packed. Golden lights, artificial laughter, cameras capturing every gesture. Lara looked stunning in white. The contrast seemed rehearsed. When the two met, they exchanged kisses on the cheek, fake and cold. "You look beautiful, Chris," Lara said. "Thank you, sister. The color of peace suits you well," Cristina replied, smiling. For a moment, silence formed around them, as if everyone sensed the tension behind her words.
During his father's speech, Alberto praised the new generation of Morettis and thanked his youngest daughter for her exemplary leadership. Cristina was not mentioned. She maintained her smile, but her heart was pounding. When the applause died down, Laura took the microphone to thank him and subtly launched into the punchline. And I also thank my sister, who has taught me strength, even in difficult times. Quiet laughter echoed through the hall. Cristina's blood boiled. Cristina stood, her gaze fixed on her sister. "Difficult, Laura, or liars?" she asked firmly. The room fell silent. Laura, momentarily taken aback, quickly composed herself. "I don't understand, dear." But Cristina was already moving forward, pulling an envelope from her purse. "Perhaps you'll understand when you read this." It was a copy of the letter she'd found, proof that Laura had contrived to change the will. Camera flashes began to go off. Alberto stood up furiously. "Cristina, enough!" His voice echoed like thunder. Elena, pale, clutched her chest. Laura feigned indignation. "You need help, Chris. You're sick." The audience, confused, murmured. Cristina looked around and realized she had lost, not for lack of evidence, but because the narrative had already been constructed. She was, in everyone's eyes, the unbalanced sister trying to destroy the perfect heiress. She left the ballroom amid pitying and contemptuous glances. Outside, the cold air made her shiver. The lights from the ball still glowed behind the windows, like a distant scene from a life no longer hers. She wept silently, feeling her makeup slip, her mask crumbling along with everything she believed in. The night that was supposed to be one of redemption had become the point of no return. When she got home, she locked herself in her room and ripped her dress. The bright red stain stained the floor, looking like blood. Elena knocked on the door, begging to come in, but Cristina didn't answer. "Leave me alone," she said, sobbing. For the first time, she felt no fear, only a profound emptiness. Everything familiar was gone. Outside, the moon illuminated the garden where she and Laura had played as children. "Forever, Chris," her sister said, holding her hand. Now that memory seemed like a cruel joke. The sound of the piano from the living room echoed, Laura playing as if nothing had happened. Cristina closed her eyes, and the hatred finally took shape. That night she swore, if Laura had stolen her future, she would steal her sister's peace. The week after the ball was a blur of silence and shame. The newspapers quietly reported on the scandal, and gossip columnists called it the night the Morettis lost their shine. Laura, skillful as ever, gave an interview about the pain of dealing with the suffering of a loved one, transforming herself into a public victim. Cristina, on the other hand, disappeared. She shut herself in her house, and for a few days, no one heard her voice.
In the dark room, surrounded by boxes and mementos, Cristina reviewed the copies of documents she still had. Among the folders and contracts, she found an old letter with the company's letterhead. Inside, a handwritten letter dated over 20 years ago. She can't know. The real father must not be mentioned. Her heart froze. The words, mysterious and direct, felt like a confession. And the signature at the end, H.M., left no doubt. Helena Moretti. Cristina felt the ground slip away from under her feet. The chance that had previously tormented her now became palpable. Laura wasn't Alberto's daughter. She was another man's daughter, the secret her mother had carried for decades. It explained everything: the favoritism, the fear, the guilt. And more than that, it meant Laura had no claim to the inheritance. The irony was bitter. The imposter had won the game of legitimacy. That night, Cristina decided to act, not for revenge, but for justice. That's what she told herself, though what burned in her chest was something darker. She gathered her mother's letters, records, and box of keepsakes, hiding them all in a leather suitcase. "This time, no one will silence me," she murmured in the mirror,
seeing in her reflection a hardened version of herself. The face that had once brimmed with sadness now exuded purpose. The next day, she went to the company for the first time since the scandal. Everyone watched her as if they were seeing a ghost. Laura was in a meeting, and her father, surprised to see her, asked what she was doing there. "I came to say goodbye," she replied. The statement disarmed Alberto, who didn't sense the hidden malice. "Are you leaving the country?" "Myself," she replied enigmatically, and left the office with a slight smile. That afternoon, she met with the family's former lawyer, Dr. Salas. He hesitated before accepting her, fearing repercussions from Laura. But when he saw the letters, he paled. "My God, she never knew." Cristina shook her head. "Now she knows, and so do I." He begged her not to use it to destroy the family, but Cristina didn't respond. She had already crossed the line between pain and hatred, and when love dies, what remains is the need for justice. That night, she called Laura. "Can we talk?" she asked calmly. "Sure, sister. Are you finally going to apologize?" Cristina smiled to herself. "More or less." They arranged to meet at the old lake house where they had spent childhood vacations. The place was abandoned, surrounded by weeds and memories. It was the perfect setting for the upcoming reckoning. Before leaving, Helena tried to stop her. "Cristina, don't go. Please listen to me." Her mother trembled. "There are things you don't understand." But her daughter was no longer listening. "I understand enough, Mother, and maybe now the world needs to understand too." She grabbed the suitcase with the evidence and left, leaving Helena crumbling behind the door. The past, finally, was about to be unearthed. On the way to the lake house, the sky began to pour down with rain. The sound of the drops on the windshield seemed to match Cristina's heartbeat. It was the same route they had taken as girls, laughing in the back seat. Now, it would be the same route that would separate them forever. Fate, like the storm, seemed inevitable. The gate to the lake house creaked open, revealing a leaf-strewn garden and a moss-covered facade. Cristina entered slowly, smelling musty and forgotten memories. On the main wall still hung the portrait of the two girls, Laura and herself, arm in arm, smiling. But now a crack ran through the glass, cutting their faces in half. "Perfect," she murmured. Time had done what she hadn't dared to do. Laura arrived minutes later, shielded by a white umbrella. "Did you bring me here for nostalgia or drama?" she asked with a mocking smile. "For real," Cristina replied. She dropped her suitcase on the table and opened it. The letters, the will, and the dossier were there. "You stole what was never yours, but now everyone will know." Laura laughed out loud, a nervous laugh. "You're not gonna do that. Mom would never let you." "Oh, so you know," Cristina teased. Her sister hesitated, her smile faltering. "Of course I know. She told me when I was 17. She said you couldn't handle the truth." Cristina swallowed. "And what's crueler, she protected you even though she knew it would destroy me." Laura crossed her arms. "She protected you too, only in a different way. You always wanted Daddy's love. I wanted hers, and in the end, neither of us got anything." The words cut through the air like blades. For the first time, Laura seemed vulnerable. Cristina wanted to feel pity, but anger was stronger. "You lied, you manipulated, and you still want me to understand?" she screamed. Laura took a step forward. "You don't understand, Chris. I just wanted to exist. You already had everything. I was the mistake, the shadow, the secret." Tears were streaming now, but Cristina remained unmoved. "And to do that, you had to destroy my life?" A clap of thunder echoed, and the light flickered. Helena appeared in the doorway, soaked and desperate. "Stop this! You're repeating what your father and I did." They both turned, stunned. "What?" Cristina asked. Helena took a deep breath, sobbing.
I also destroyed a family. Laura's father was married, and when he died, I promised I would make it up to the daughter he never knew. I did it all out of guilt. Everything." The silence that followed was suffocating. Laura looked at her mother stunned, and then at Cristina. "So I never had a father?" Helena approached, crying. "You did, but I hid him to protect you." The revelation shattered all three of them in different ways. The weight of decades of lies fell upon them like the storm outside. Cristina dropped her suitcase. The evidence meant nothing anymore. What mattered was what was left, and it was little. Laura knelt, collapsing. "I just wanted to belong." Helena hugged her, and Cristina watched, unsure whether to feel hatred or compassion. For the first time, she saw her sister not as a rival, but as a consequence. Tears came without warning. The cracked portrait hanging on the wall swayed in the wind. It was the perfect reflection of the Moretti family, shattered, but still standing.
When the storm subsided, the three of them stood in silence, side by side, not looking at each other. Helena murmured, "Now you know the weight of a secret." Cristina took a deep breath. "And the price of a lie." Laura simply closed her eyes. For the first time, the hatred between them seemed tired, worn out. But inside Cristina, something new was emerging, a dangerous calm. Because even with the whole truth exposed, she still hadn't decided what to do with it. The days following the encounter at the lake house were filled with heavy silence. Helena locked herself in her room, as if the past had finally taken its toll. Laura didn't show up at home. She disappeared without warning, and the newspapers began to speculate about her absence. Cristina, for her part, remained calm, cold, methodical, almost inhuman. The revelation had shattered something within her, but it had also unleashed something else, a new and dangerous lucidity. In her father's old office, she organized the evidence like someone piecing together a final jigsaw puzzle. Letters, forged contracts, doctored emails, transactions in the name of third parties. The Moretti empire was a tapestry of lies. For years, she had believed the family legacy was a badge of honor. Now I knew it was just a disguise. "Everything we built was built on sand," he murmured as he stacked the documents. During a visit to the company, Cristina noticed the growing chaos. Rumors of corruption were already circulating among shareholders, and Laura, even absent, was the center of suspicion. Her father, furious, tried to control the situation with his usual arrogance. "These accusations are fabricated by envious people," he said. But there was fear in his voice, the fear of someone who knows the truth is all too close. Cristina watched, impassive. For the first time, he seemed small. That evening, she met again with Dr. Sales, the lawyer she had helped in the past. This time, he didn't argue. He simply studied the papers with a grave expression. "With this, you can bring down everything, Cristina. The company, the family name, your father." She took a deep breath. "That's it then. The truth comes first." He nodded. "But remember, when you destroy an empire, you also destroy what's left of yourself." The words echoed, but she didn't back down. Back at the mansion, she found Helena in the living room looking through old photos. "Are you really going to do this?" her mother asked, her voice weary. "I have already done what I had to do. Now I'm just going to show you." Helena sighed. "Do you think this will cure you? It'll just trade one pain for another." Cristina replied with a sad smile. "Maybe, but at least this time the pain will be fair." Her mother said no more,
just wept silently. The next morning, Cristina received a message from Laura. It contained a single address and a single sentence. "If you're going to destroy me, let it be by looking into my eyes." The text shook her more than she expected. Part of her wanted to deny it, forget it, move on. But the other part, the hurt, betrayed, and hungry for justice, knew she needed to close that cycle. And there was only one way, to expose everything in front of everyone. She scheduled an emergency meeting with the company's board. Alberto, surprised, demanded to know the reason. "Transparency," he replied, "something this family has forgotten." He laughed in disbelief. "Are you going to destroy the Moretti name?" Cristina glared at him. "The Moretti name is already rotten. I'm just going to strip the veneer." His expression hardened. "You're just like your mother." She replied calmly. "No, Dad. I'm what you created." On the morning of the meeting, the main hall was packed. Shareholders, lawyers, and the press, invited under the pretext of a press conference on administrative restructuring. When Cristina took the stage, the murmur died down. Laura stood there, pale, her gaze fixed. Her father, beside her, maintained his posture, but was sweating discreetly. Elena, at the back of the room, seemed to have aged decades in just a few hours. Cristina took a deep breath. "It's time," she thought. She opened the file on the lectern and began to speak. Each word was a blade, each document a blow. The charts, the letters, the fake contracts, everything unfolded before the audience's astonished eyes. Laura tried to interrupt, but Cristina raised her voice. "You stole what didn't belong to you, and he left it, and now everyone will know what this family really is." The audience murmured. The Moretti empire was beginning to crumble there, before the cameras. When it was over, there was absolute silence. Her father watched her with a mixture of hatred and despair. Laura, in tears, stood up. "You won, Chris," she said, her voice trembling. "But none of this will give you back what you lost." Cristina replied, "I don't want it back. I just want it to end." The words echoed, cold like a sentence. And in that instant, all power, status, and pride vanished into thin air. The repercussions were immediate. Within hours, newspapers were reporting the scandal. Fraud, inheritance, and secrets destroy the Moretti family. The company collapsed. The shareholders walked away, and Alberto was forced to resign. Laura disappeared again, and Elena was hospitalized after a nervous breakdown. Cristina, in turn, became the face of destruction, the daughter who exposed the corruption in her own home. But for the first time, she felt no shame. She felt relief. That same night, her father appeared at her house, aged, haggard, but still proud. "You ruined everything, Cristina." She looked at him calmly. "I wasn't the one who built it on lies." He approached. "You think you are brave, but you are just weak. Too weak to bear the truth." She smiled. "The truth is what you feared most your entire life, father, and it was the truth that defeated you." For a moment he seemed about to answer, but then he decided against it. He left without looking back.
Days later, Cristina received a call from a foreign number. It was Laura. "We're still alive, aren't we?" she said on the other end of the line. "More than ever," Cristina replied. "So what comes next?" her sister asked. "Now, silence, and the price." The connection dropped, and Cristina realized that even from a distance, they were still connected, two halves of a wound that would never heal. Meanwhile, Helena returned home. She walked slowly, as if each room reminded her of the weight of a wrong choice. "Is it over?" she asked. Cristina nodded. "On the outside, yes." Her mother hugged her, crying. "I just wanted you to be free." Cristina replied, "Now we are. I just don't know if that's happiness or damnation." And the two of them stood there, embracing each other, amidst the emotional ruins and the silence that remained. The next morning, Cristina went to the company's old headquarters. The building was empty, the sign being removed. She entered one last time, running her hand over the furniture, the walls, the hallways where she had grown up. Everything seemed smaller. In her father's office, she found the family portrait, cracked and discarded on the floor, the same one that hung in the house. She picked it up, dusted it off, and smiled sadly. Maybe now it will show who we really are. Outside, the sun rose timidly, and the wind blew lightly. The city commented, judged, and forgot, as always. But Cristina walked in peace, for the first time without needing to prove anything to anyone. Each step was a farewell, to the heiress, to the exemplary daughter, to the betrayed sister. All that remained was the woman who outlived her own family. Late that afternoon, she returned to the lake house. The place still smelled of rain and confession. She sat on the same couch where the truth had been told. From her pocket, she took a letter, not from Laura, but from her mother, left on her bed. "If I could start over, I would tell the truth before love became a weapon. Take care of your peace, daughter, and don't look back." Cristina read in silence, discreet tears falling onto the paper. She looked at the cracked portrait she had brought with her. She placed it on the table, next to a lit candle. "Goodbye, Moretti." The flame flickered, reflecting in her eyes like embers. The past burned, but it no longer burned her. The future was uncertain, and for the first time, that didn't frighten her. It only freed her. Outside, the lake reflected the orange sunset sky. And when the wind blew, Cristina felt something light, as if finally the burden had been lifted. The scandal dissipated as quickly as it had come. Within weeks, other families, other tragedies, and other names made headlines. But for Cristina, the silence that remained was deafening. The house, too large, seemed a constant echo of what had been. The walls held memories of laughter, fights, and dinners. Now, only the sound of the wind blew through the rooms. Loneliness, for the first time, was not absence, but presence. Helena spent her days sleeping, overcome with exhaustion and guilt. Sometimes she woke screaming names, mixing present and past. Cristina cared for her with silent tenderness, not out of duty, but out of humanity. She knew they were both survivors of the same ancient error, the lie that had united and destroyed the Morettis. There was no longer any anger, only the profound weariness of someone who has seen the worst of love and the best of truth.
One morning, as she opened the windows, Cristina smelled autumn. Leaves were falling in the garden, and for the first time, the scenery seemed peaceful. She grabbed a cup of coffee and watched the leaves move, remembering her childhood, the swing, Laura's laughter, her father calling them to dinner. Everything seemed distant, like a forgotten dream. Were we ever happy? She asked herself quietly. The answer was silence and a light breeze. Days later, the mailman left an envelope with no return address. The postmark was from Lisbon. Inside was a single, handwritten page. "I don't know if I hate you or understand you. Maybe both. I'm alive, and that's all I can tell you right now. L." Cristina read and reread the words, trying to decipher the tone. There was no threat, only resignation. She tucked the letter between the pages of the notebook where she recorded her memories, as if archiving a chapter, not a person. Late that afternoon, he visited his father's grave. No flowers, no tribute, just the name engraved in cold marble. "You won, Dad, but I survived." He stood there for long minutes until the sun began to set. For the first time, He didn't feel angry. He felt pity. The man who had sacrificed love for appearances had died the same way he had lived, without knowing what tenderness was. When she returned home, she found her mother awake, sewing. "Are you finishing something?" she asked. Helena smiled weakly. "I'm just keeping my hands busy. When we stop, the past comes to sit beside us." Cristina took her hand. "It's already here, Mom. But now we can look at it without fear." Helena nodded, moved. The two of them stayed like that for hours, sewing memories together in silence. That night, Cristina went up to the attic. The place was filled with old boxes, covered in dust and age. He opened one and found Laura's diary wrapped in blue ribbon. He hesitated before touching it. The yellowed pages exuded her sister's familiar scent. He sat on the floor and began to read. The first line spoke of envy, love, and guilt. "She was always everything I wanted to be, and then I hated her and loved her at the same time." Each page revealed a fragment of Laura's mind: the needy girl, the ambitious young woman, the woman torn between love and resentment. There were also confessions. "I didn't want what was hers. I wanted to be her." Cristina wept silently. The hatred, the fear, the struggle, all seemed small compared to the pain that lay there, recorded in trembling letters. The diary was more than a plea for forgiveness. It was a mirror. He closed the diary and stared at the attic ceiling, where the wind filtered through ancient cracks. He realized that beneath it all, there was still love. Crooked, wounded, distorted, but love. The man who doesn't save, but teaches. He put the diary away next to the letter from Lisbon, as if sealing the cycle. Revenge had lost its flavor, justice its weight. All that remained was the peace of someone who no longer needs to defeat anyone. Before going to sleep, he lit a candle in the window. The flame flickered gently, illuminating his serene face. It was his way of telling his sister, wherever she was, that the hatred was over. And with it, the Moretti War. The mansion now felt like an abandoned body. The sound of creaking doors, the echo of footsteps, the old perfume on the furniture, everything was a memory. Helena spent her days in silence, coming and going from the hospital. Cristina, alone most of the time, wrote, not about what she had experienced, but about what she had learned. Families are like mirrors. They show what we love and what we deny in ourselves. The words flowed, light and painful. One day, she found the cracked portrait leaning against the wall. She carefully cleaned it and observed. The two girls, holding hands, smiled at a future that would never be. Cristina ran her fingers along the crack and considered gluing the glass back together, but decided against it. Some things need to stay broken so we remember what they cost. She leaned the painting against the corner and opened the windows. The cool morning air brought a sense of new beginnings. That afternoon, she received a visit from a former company employee, Mr. Guido. "I came to see if you needed anything." Cristina smiled. "Just company." They sat on the porch, drinking coffee and talking about the past. He explained that many of the employees had left out of respect for her, not Laura. "You were fair, Mrs. Cristina, and in the end, that's what matters most." His words moved her more than she expected. In the following days, she began selling the furniture, the paintings, the jewelry, everything that symbolized the Moretti's burden. With each object that left the house, she felt lighter. When Helena questioned her, she replied, "I'm not losing anything. I'm just taking out what doesn't belong to me." Little by little, the empty rooms began to breathe again. It was as if the house, finally, was freeing itself too. One afternoon, the mailman returned. This time, he brought a small box. Inside was a seashell and a note. "One day, the sound of the sea reminded me of us. Maybe there's still time. L." Cristina smiled. The shell, cold in her hands, seemed to pulsate. There was no longer any resentment in those words, only nostalgia. She placed the shell on the mantelpiece, next to the lit candle. "Maybe so, Laura, but now it's my turn." As the weeks passed, the routine became simple. Walks at dawn, books in the afternoon, music at night. Silence stopped being punishment and became shelter. Sometimes she still dreamed of the past, the sound of the piano, the smell of her sister's perfume, her father's stern gaze. But she woke serene. Time was finally beginning to mend what pain had torn. One spring morning, Helena passed away in her sleep. She found her with a faint smile on her face, her hands crossed over her chest. On the nightstand, a letter. "The truth has set us free, daughter. Now live for us." Cristina cried, but it was a sweet cry, a mourning that came with gratitude. The cycle, at last, was complete. The weight of secrets had dissolved with her mother's last breath.
Days later, she locked the house and walked to the gate. She looked back one last time. The Moretti mansion, now silent and empty, seemed to fall asleep in the sun. "Thank you," she whispered, and she left, driven not by escape, but by the desire to begin. The past was left behind, not as a prison, but as a learning experience. And ahead, the light sound of the wind brought something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. The road to the countryside seemed endless, cutting through green fields and golden horizons. Cristina drove slowly, the windows open, the wind playing with her hair. The sound of the engine was the only noise between her and the world. There was no specific destination, only the desire to go. For the first time, the absence of a destination didn't scare her. It was freedom. A freedom built on ruins, but freedom nonetheless. After hours, he stopped in a small seaside town. The scent of salt mingled with that of wildflowers, and the sound of the waves seemed to speak to the silence it held. He rented a simple house with white walls and blue windows. No portraits, no symbols of power, just an empty space, ready to be filled with new stories. As he entered, he took a deep breath and felt that finally he belonged somewhere. The days passed slowly and gently. Cristina learned to wake up slowly, to cook for herself, to walk barefoot on the sand. Time was no longer an enemy. She wrote every morning in a new notebook, not about the past, but about what she saw: the sea, the seagulls, the children playing. "Life is what begins when the noise stops," she wrote on one page. It was the epitome of the new woman being born there. One afternoon, while reading on the porch, the mailman appeared with an envelope. The postmark was from Portugal. Her heart raced even before she touched the paper. She sat down and opened it slowly. Inside was a single letter and an old photograph, the two of them still girls, holding hands in the mansion's garden. The text read, "Now I understand what you tried to teach me. Love can also be courage. Thank you for letting me be free. L." Cristina read it and was silent for a long time. The words seemed to dissolve what remained of the pain. For the first time, she didn't cry. She just smiled. She tucked the photo into the diary she'd started, not as a bitter memory,
but as a root. The past, after all, was part of what had made her whole. She looked out to sea, and for a moment she swore she heard her sister's voice wafting in the distance, mingling with the wind. That night, she walked along the beach under a full moon. The reflection of the light on the waves reminded her of the old windows of the Moretti house, now just a memory. Each step left a mark that the water quickly erased, and Cristina thought that perhaps this was how life works. Nothing lasts, but everything teaches. She stopped before the sea and closed her eyes. "I forgive you, Laura." And the wind carried the words, as if the sea itself accepted them.
Back home, he lit a candle and placed it in the window as his mother had done. "For anyone who's on the way," he said softly. The flame flickered, casting soft shadows on the walls. He sat at the table and wrote the last page of his diary. "Today I don't miss anything. Not what I lost, not what I dreamed of. Everything that's left is light, and it's enough." When he finished, he closed the notebook with a serene sigh. The next morning she woke early. The sky was clear, the sea calm. She made coffee and sat on the porch watching the sunrise. The golden light bathed everything, and she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: peace. A simple peace, without explanations, without pretense. Just the pleasure of existing. From her pocket, she took the seashell Laura had sent and held it to her ear. The sound of the sea filled her heart. The past now was just history, a story that had ended, but that would live on between the lines. Cristina smiled, looking at the horizon. The wind ruffled her hair, and she let it. "Finally, I'm mine," she said lightly. And it was true. For the first time, she wasn't a daughter, nor an heir, nor a victim. She was simply herself, whole, free, and at peace with who she had been. As the sun rose over the sea, Cristina stood, barefoot, and walked to the water's edge. The cool foam touched her feet, and she laughed softly like a girl. The sea returned its brightness to the world, and she felt in every wave the silent presence of those left behind. She looked at the horizon one last time and whispered, "Now, yes, I'm back home." Cristina lost everything, but found herself. And you, have you ever thought what you would do if your greatest betrayal came from within your own home? If this story touched you, please like, share, and subscribe, because here each story proves that even the purest love can hide the deepest pain.